Hi, friends. Welcome back. This week's mini-sode is going to be on self-compassion. And I did another episode on this as well. It was episode 45. I can link it in the show notes. But I wanted to revisit it. I wanted to go into a little bit more detail because I see our inability to show ourselves compassion or have self-compassion showing up in so many different areas of our lives. And I see it in myself and my friends and my families and people I work with, and I see it everywhere. So I thought it was worth a revisit, this self-compassion topic. So in a minute, I'm going to go into some detail about what it is and why it's important and how we can practice it. It is actually a learnable skill, so that's the good news. Self-compassion is a learnable skill. So if you don't have the skill now, don't fret. You can learn this, and we're going to talk about how we can do that as well. But before I jump into all of that, I wanted to remind you that we are a week out from my summit, Journeying Home to Yourself, that is going to be held August 6th, 7th, and 8th from 12 to 4 or 12 to 3. There's one day we only have 3 speakers. So it will be an awesome summit. There will be so many amazing guest speakers. It's all female, it's all women speakers talking on different topics related to coming home to yourself. So what gets in the way of us being our most authentic selves? There are so many things, and these guest speakers are going to speak to so many different ways in which we separate ourselves from our true self. And that comes in so many different sneaky ways, from different fears that we hold to the burnout that we experience from trying to keep all the balls in the air as we do as women and mothers, to expectations from parents, partners, cultural expectations, all those things. It is an issue in learning how to know, how do I make a shift? We're going to have a talk on 1% shifts. How do we get from where we are to where we want to be? And how do we do that in a way that's sustainable, whether that be with your health or your career or how you want to be with your family? There are so many changes we often want to see in our lives. And how do we get from point A to point B in a way that we can that feels achievable for us, and also results in lasting change. We're going to talk about community because I think community is the backbone of a happy life. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with the blue zones, but in the blue zones, they list, I think it's 9 or 10 different things where people living the longest and the healthiest around the world engage in, and community is right up there. It was in those 10 listed things, and it is just so important to our health and welfare, our emotional health, our physical health. And so we're going to be having a whole talk on community. There are just amazing speakers, and they're going to give you a lot to think about. And they also will give you free things to help you take it a step further, to take the things that you learn in their talk and apply it into your own personal life. So that's also a great part of the summit. And the summit is free. So there's no harm in signing up. You have access to the videos if you can't come live. There will be a web page where you can go and access all the videos that will be recorded, and you will also be able to download their free items there. So go to momontheverge.org/summit and sign up. And we would love, love, love to see you there. I would love to see more women getting out of their own way and being able to do the things that light them up, be able to be the people that they want to be in the world, release fear and anxiety about being judged or that there's something wrong with them or that they're not good enough. And that's what we're going to be doing here. We're going to be pulling all of those constructs apart and really getting to the root of why we don't live the life that we always want to live. And of course, there'll be a talk on Dharma as well, because I'll be presenting as well. So at any rate, I hope you sign up. I hope to see you there. But let's talk some self-compassion. So self-compassion is compassion turned inward, right? It's compassion that we're not giving outward to somebody else. We're turning it in toward ourselves. And the word can be broken up to COM. The first part is with, COM stands for with, and passion is suffering. So with suffering, to be with suffering is literally what the word compassion means. And it means self-compassion means to be with our own suffering in the same way that we would respond to a loved one. But we are often harsh towards ourselves. We criticize ourselves when we make mistakes, when we face challenges. Oftentimes we feel inadequate. And we often believe that by chastising ourselves, by being, harsh on ourselves, that we will do better the next time. Or that by burying our feelings and putting on that stiff upper lip, we will motivate ourselves to do better the next time. But it's actually not true. There's Kristin Neff. You can go to her website. She is the founder of a lot of self-compassion practices and has taught self-compassion for a very long time. She's an amazing resource. So you can go to her website. She has some books. But these things in research do not bear out. We do not do better when we chastise ourselves. We don't do better when we bury our feelings and put on that stiff upper lip. And we're not more productive. We don't achieve more. We don't fit in better. We don't feel less flawed. It just doesn't work. So the opposite happens to be true. That's what the research shows, that people with higher levels of self-compassion actually have better mental health. They're more motivated. They tend to have what's called a growth mindset. And if you don't know what that is, that's basically a person who is always looking to learn. They're always looking to grow and evolve and learn and become a better version of themselves. They're not stuck in their ways and their ideas and really holding on tight to them. They're open to shifting perspectives. Probably if you're listening to the show, you have a growth mindset. I'm going to bet if you are a listener of this show, you have a growth mindset. People with higher levels of self-compassion are also have a higher emotional quotient. So they understand their feelings better and can deal with their feelings better. And they also understand and deal with others, their feelings better. They are more empathetic. They cope with work and life challenges better. And then they tend to be healthier. They tend to actually make better health choices. And as a result of making better health choices, they have better physical health as well. So like I said, the good news is that if you are listening to this and you're thinking, actually, I am terrible. I have terrible skills in self-compassion. I am that person who, really speaks unkindly to myself or tries to bury my feelings and put on the stiff upper lip. This is a learnable skill. So there are three main parts of self-compassion, and the first one is self-kindness. So self-kindness versus self-judgment. Self-kindness refers to how warm and kind, supportive, and encouraging we are towards ourselves when we make a mistake or we fail at something. Or even when we feel inadequate or we're going through a hard time in life. And when I think about self-kindness, I, as a mom, often think about my children and how I would respond to them if they made a mistake, if they failed at something, if they came home saying that they felt inadequate, for some reason, or if they were going through a really hard time. How would I respond to them? Would I be harsh, judgmental, cold, shaming, or would I be kind and loving and supportive and encouraging? And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about all the ways that you would be towards someone who you love. You're going to turn that around and be that way towards yourself. And drop the judgment and drop the shaming and the blaming, and really give yourself a warm hug and a sense of you are okay, everything's okay. And I'm here for you. You can say, I'm here for you to yourself. That's not just something you can say to someone else outside of you. You can put your hand on your heart or cross your arms over your chest and give yourself a hug, or look in the mirror and look into your own eyes and say, I am here for you. You are safe and you are supported, and there is nothing wrong with you. You are perfect in every way. And it allows you to feel that safeness and support it. When we feel safe and we feel supported, it allows us to work through those struggles more easily. It allows us to process the difficult emotions without getting stuck in them. Because when we try to shove the emotions down, or we shame them, or we blame them, often we get stuck in them. That same emotion just keeps popping to the surface, popping up. You just keep finding yourself in that same emotion. Really, the way to prevent that from happening is to lean into the emotion and allow it to be with support and kindness. And then it will pass like a wave. It will come, it will rise, and it will fall, and it will go out to sea. And it may come back in a different situation or circumstance. You might have to repeat this process over and over, but related to that particular experience, that emotion is now processed and has left your body and your brain. And when that happens, it allows you to actually learn from the experience and bring that learning forward into your life in positive ways. So if you've ever had a situation where you tried at something and you failed, probably all of us have had that situation at some point in our lives. We wanted something, we tried for it, it failed. Even if it's as simple as making a new recipe, right? I just tried a new recipe, and by the end, I was like, this is terrible. I got to throw it out, right? That's a minor example, but in one nonetheless. And we could shame and blame and say, oh my God, I suck at this. I should never try to make that again. That was terrible. I wasted all that food and all the money that it cost to buy that food. And now I got to order pizza for dinner. And now I'm feeding my kids junk. And right, we could go on and on and on about all the terrible things. Or we could say, that was hard and it stinks that I, wasted all the food, or I took the time and it didn't work out, but I'm going to try it again because this is what I learned from doing it the first time. And I learned what I did that I could do differently to make it better. And I tried, and I'm growing and I'm learning, and I love you. Like, your worth is not dependent on whether that meal came out good or not, right? It does not a reflection of your worth at all. So this is just a very small example of how we can take something that is difficult, maybe a mistake we made or something we failed at, where we're feeling inadequate, and we can, give ourselves kindness, and then let the emotion move through us, and then learn from what we experienced and move forward. So the next part, so I said there were three main elements of self-compassion, and this is through Kristin Neff. This is all of her work and her research. So the next big element of self-compassion is common humanity versus isolation. So often when we suffer from feelings of inadequacy, or we fail at something, or we're just struggling in our lives, right? Maybe some really difficult things are happening in our lives. We feel like we're the only one. We're alone. And we're out in the ocean, in a storm, on a tiny boat, all by ourselves. And there is no one else who is experiencing what we're experiencing or could possibly understand what we're going through. That's how we feel. And then we start to feel like there is something wrong, like inherently wrong with us, and that we should hide that from the world, because if the world found out about us, and last week's episode was on imposter syndrome, so this kind of relates to that. That was unintentional, but if the world found out about us and where we had failed, or what we were struggling with in our lives, or how inadequate we felt, then they would not want to be our friend, that they would judge us, that they would ostracize us, that they wouldn't understand. But the truth is, to be human is to suffer, right? It is part of the human experience. It is a shared part of the human experience, suffering. And we will all suffer in our lives. There's really no escape from that. And we have to recognize that when we recognize that suffering is part of the human experience, it makes us feel less alone, and it makes us feel connected into the common roots of humanity. So to fail, to feel inadequate, to make mistakes, to have challenging times in life doesn't separate us from others. It actually connects us to them. And when we realize that these feelings are inescapable for anyone, we can have more compassion for our own suffering as well as the suffering of others. Okay, so the next time that you are experiencing something that's hard, you feel inadequate in some way, you have failed at something, or something is really hard for you, I want you to come back to that common humanity piece and know that this is part of the human experience, just like suffering in general is part of the human experience, and that you are not alone. Okay, our third piece to talk about, the third element of self-compassion, is mindfulness. So, of course, I love this. And the definition of mindfulness that first came out through Jon Kabat-Zinn is paying attention in the present moment without judgment. And when we apply this concept to self-compassion, mindfulness allows us to see our suffering with a little bit of distance. So this is where meditation can come in. That's the whole concept, is that it's not that those things aren't there. It's not that we don't have feelings around these difficult experiences. It's that we are a little bit removed. So instead of being so in the suffering, we can witness the suffering as if we were kind of watching it on a movie screen. And when we aren't trying to fight against what is, right? So we're allowing what is, we are paying attention to how we feel without judging ourselves for feeling the feelings that we feel. So this allows us to pan out and see a larger picture of what's going on. And I think we've probably all experienced this, where when we're so in the suffering, the pain of whatever is happening, our lens through which we see the world gets smaller and smaller and smaller until we really can only see the suffering. But if we can get that little bit of distance from the experience, and see a wider view, because when we get a little bit of a distance, it's like, opening up the aperture of a camera to more of a panoramic view, we can see the larger picture of what's going on, and then we can slightly detach from the experience, because we all know that even though we may be going through something really hard and suffering, that there's also more going in our lives, right? That's not the only thing that's happening in our lives, but the suffering and the pain of the suffering wants us to believe, our brain tells us that that's the only thing going on. But when we get that little bit of distance, we can see that there's actually a lot more going on in our lives, and a lot of really good things too. And it allows us to have the mindfulness and the awareness to say, I'm not alone. This is the common experience of humanity. And it allows us to be kind to ourselves. So I feel like mindfulness, even though Kristin Neff lists it as the third element, and I don't know if she believes that it should be done in any certain order, it is my belief that the mindfulness comes first, because without the ability to have a little bit of distance and see the larger picture, then we would lose the ability to have enough awareness to say this is a common experience for all of humanity. And we lose the ability to be kind to ourselves, to consciously be kind to ourselves, right? Purposely be kind to ourselves. You really need that distance, that awareness, that mindfulness, because it helps us step outside of ourselves enough to not over-identify with the feelings or to shove them down, right? Because those are the two things that happen. We can just instead hold them gently and allow them to be there before releasing them. So the mindfulness piece is huge. And even if you're in the middle of the storm, even if you are so in it, you are criticizing yourself, you are feeling really difficult emotions, you are unable to see anything but the challenge of what you're going through, and you have 1 second where you stop and you become aware that that's what you're doing, you have started moving towards self-compassion, because then you can change those things, right? You can start being kind to yourself. You can start recognizing that this is a common experience of humanity and not singular to you, and therefore not judging yourself because you are having these difficult experiences or feelings. The most important question you can ask yourself when you're suffering is, what do I need right now to alleviate this suffering? And that's another thing that mindfulness brings, right? So when we're in it, sometimes we're so in it that we don't stop to ask ourselves, what do I need right now? And that's, again, something that you would ask someone you love who is suffering. How can I help? How can I help you? What can I do are questions you would ask. And it's a question that you can ask yourself, just like you can say, I love you to yourself. I'm here for you. I support you. I'm holding you right now. All those same things. You can also say to yourself, what do I need right now to alleviate this suffering? What can I do for myself that's going to help me move through these difficult emotions and process them and get to the other side? So I would highly encourage you to do that the next time you notice you are suffering, the next time you notice that you are judging yourself and being critical of yourself, or that you are having difficult emotions that you're trying to shove down, or that you're trying to be perfect, or you are not allowing your true self to come through because you're afraid other people won't like it or accept it, or it won't be good enough. Those are moments of suffering. And you can then turn to yourself and ask, how do I alleviate this? What do I need to do to feel better? So there are two kinds of self-compassion, tender and fierce. And tender self-compassion is a lot of what we've been talking about. It's gentle, it's supportive, it's you are present with the suffering and allowing it to be without judgment, and you're loving yourself through the suffering. That's tender self-compassion. Fierce self-compassion is more action-oriented. It's about setting boundaries. It's about saying no when you don't want to do something. And it's about asking for your needs to be met, and also meeting your own needs, right? So you can ask others for help in meeting your needs, but you also have to meet your own needs. So if you're tired, you rest. If you really need to work out because that makes you feel better, then you make the space to work out. If you really need your sleep, you're a type of person who really needs your sleep, you set boundaries around sleep and you make sure that you get your sleep, right? So it's action oriented, and we need both. We need both tender and fierce self-compassion in our lives. They really go hand in hand and work together to create that overall experience of self-compassion. We just need different things at different times and in different circumstances. So we have to be aware of what we need in that moment. Okay, things to remember. This can be a radically new way of thinking and behaving. It takes practice, just like everything else we talk about on this show. It's a practice, it's a practice, it's a practice. I can't say that enough. You have to keep coming back to it. You will not be perfect at it in the beginning, in the middle, and there is no end, right? So it's an ongoing practice. Will you get better? Yes. Will you learn to be overall more self-compassionate and find yourself criticizing yourself less and being kinder to yourself more? Absolutely. But will you eliminate it entirely? unlikely. So again, have self-compassion for your own ability or inability to have self-compassion during a particular situation. And every time you recognize that you are not being self-compassionate and you turn the boat around and you stop the behaviors that are not self-compassionate and you start the ones that are, you have stepped forward. You've stepped in the right direction and you've laid that tract in your brain, that samskara is what we call it in yoga. Neuropathway is what they call it in science. And you're making it stronger. So know that, and the next time will be easier and the time after that will be easier. And it just keeps going that way. You just have to allow yourself to be a slow learner and know that at first it could be really uncomfortable, and it's okay. It's okay if it's slow. It's okay if it's uncomfortable. And it's okay to come out of the practice if it gets too uncomfortable. If you get to the point where it's so unfamiliar to you that when you start doing this, you become very uncomfortable, go to the sensation of your breath or do something that is comforting to you. Because a self-compassion practice doesn't mean that the pain and suffering will immediately go away. And it may even get a little bit worse at first. If you ever think about being comforted by another, right? Maybe you're suffering. I think a lot of us have had this experience too. You're experiencing something, it's really difficult. You're having a lot of difficult emotions, and a friend comes over and says, "Are you okay?" Or your partner comes over and, gives you a hug, and then that's it. The dam opens up, right? You are in puddles of tears. And what happened there, right? It's someone showed you compassion and care and support, and it actually ignited, it kind of allowed these difficult emotions that you were holding in there to come out even more. And so that's okay. That's part of the process, and that's also okay. So if you're being compassionate with yourself and you are finding that it's making those emotions even stronger, that's not a sign that something's wrong. It's not a sign that you shouldn't be doing this. It's just a normal part of the process. But if it becomes too much, then you back off and then you come back to it again when you feel more centered and more calm, and you keep going back and forth until you can tolerate showing yourself the kind of compassion you need to show yourself in order to allow those emotions to pass through you, to process and pass through you. But it will give you the ability to bear the pain eventually and learn and grow from the process. So I hope that is helpful. I hope that it helps you understand better what self-compassion is and how we can show it towards ourselves and why it's important. Like I said, this is the work of Kristin Neff, so I'm going to put her website in the show notes, so you can head over there if you want to learn more. She has so many resources on her website. It's amazing. A lot of free resources as well, meditations, all kinds of things. And I just think that this is at the basis of so much of our suffering, is the inability to be with our suffering. So the inability to be with our own suffering actually creates so much more suffering in our lives. And I see it everywhere. And it's why I wanted to come back to this topic and talk about it again and bring more awareness to it. And I'm sure this topic will be showing up again on another one of my episodes. I didn't want to make this too long, and we're already about a half hour. So expect another mini-sode with a self-compassion exercise attached to it, so that we can practice this together. Okay, guys, head on over to the momontheverge.org. I'm sorry, momontheverge.org/summit. Sign up for the summit. I would love to see you there. Self-compassion will definitely be, something that we talk about a lot during the summit. These are amazing women. You are not going to want to miss even miss it. It is free. It is accessible afterwards. If you can't make it live, like just do it. I promise you, you will be so glad that you decided to sign up. All right. I love you so much. Have a wonderful week, and I will talk to you next time.